Welcome back, Mando.
If you could call upon the seas to outclean your enemies, would you?
Yo! Greetings, Bucketheads. Mevar Tagar. Welcome to our 281st Dark Side touching episode of Mandovision. Sounds dirty. I'm your host, Narguy Tom, and thank you so much for checking out this small, independent Star Wars podcast. So glad that you're here. Be sure to hit us up on the socials at Mando underscore Vision on Twitter and Instagram. Email the show, mandovisiontom@gmail.com. Make sure you're liking, subscribing, and following this show with all the Mandalorians in your covert. All right, Bucketheads, we're back. I'm doing this show. I am back from my travels. I am back from being abroad. And not a ton came out during my time away as far as Star Wars news goes. You know, a little bit of information kind of came out that they are yet again looking for a new writer for the Rey Skywalker Jedi Academy kind of movie. That's unfortunate. That's not a great thing, it seems like. I don't know. They apparently the writers they've had have not been able to crack the code on this particular film. But it's just another example of Star Wars films and sort of just, it's just not working out, and it's not a good feeling. Obviously, we have The Mandalorian and Grogu to look forward to in cinemas soon, which at this point is a tried and true, tested concept that will hopefully translate well to a cinematic Star Wars experience. I think that's what we're all hoping for out of this. But it's again, another troubled Star Wars movie, having trouble kind of getting its legs under it. And, you know, this is what we've been seeing since The Rise of Skywalker came out. So many Star Wars movies sort of like announced or teased by various creators that seem to be going nowhere. You know, obviously, there was supposed to be a whole Rian Johnson series that seems to have been quietly walked away from. I think Taika Waititi was mentioned. Obviously, the Rogue Squadron movie didn't pan out. So there's just a lot of missteps and misfires as far as things go with getting Star Wars back to the cinemas. And, you know, again, I have no particular insights to it. I have no particular skin in the game necessarily. I find it so interesting that for whatever reason it is, they can't figure this out. There's so much great Star Wars material out there that they could be, at the very least, inspired by. But I feel like, and this is something I think we've sort of talked about, Star Wars right now is trying to serve too many masters. You know, whether it's you know, it's trying to make too many people happy. It just needs to tell its story, and be, you know, throw whatever fan expectations might be out there to the wind. They need to tell their story. The story has to come first. Stop trying to people please. I think that's what I think that was one of the big downfalls of the last trilogy, was they attempted to people please, and I think it made for a not super cohesive series of films. You know, everyone has various opinions on the sequel trilogy. But I think at the very least we can all agree that it's like not like a unified vision at the very, very least. So it's surprising to me. Like I don't know why this is so hard to do. I don't know why telling a Star Wars story is such a complicated arithmetic for these people. It's Star Wars. It's not it's not rocket science, man. Let's go ahead and just tell your story and stop trying to figure out how to make everybody happy or make Disney more money because you're going to have 1,000 toys and product placement and all this other various things that go into making movies nowadays. Like, can we just have a Star Wars movie that tells us a really good story? That is my minimum requirement. That's all I'm really asking. Again, I hope it works out. I hope they find writers who are gonna sort of crack the code on whatever that script may turn out to be for Rey. Again, I have my issues with the sequel trilogy, but I'm excited for Rey to sort of pick up the pieces and move the story forward. Someone needs to, because God, you know how I feel. Star Wars needs to push boundaries. It needs to push forward. And right now we're still sort of stuck in this time of the Empire, this time of the Imperial Remnant in the case of Grogu and the Mandalorian. But we shall see if they can kind of get this figured out. Otherwise, it's been sort of slow on the Star Wars front. We haven't gotten a trailer for season 2 of Andor yet. I suspect that'll probably come closer to when Skeleton Crew drops in December. We'll see. But we do have Skeleton Crew to look forward to, so that's exciting stuff. Otherwise, let's just get into our Rebels rewatch, because that's what we're doing right now. And again, I've had a really good time rewatching this series, and that holds true with this episode, which is sort of the second part of the Empire Day two-parter. It is called Gathering Forces. So let's go ahead and get the episode particulars out of the way. This is Star Wars Rebels, Season 1, Episode 9, Gathering Forces. Original air date, November 17th, 2014. Written by Greg Wiseman, directed by Stuart Lee. Our primary cast for this episode: Taylor Gray is Ezra Bridger, Vanessa Marshall is Harrison Dula, Freddie Prinze Jr. is Kanan Jarrus, Tia Sakar is Sabine Wren, Steve Blum is Zeb Orielos, Dave Filoni is Chopper, and Ashley Eckstein once again returns as the voice of Fulcrum. Small part, but in this episode. Though this cast note's a little brief because there's another cast member in this episode. So IMDb, you have failed me. You know what? I had the wrong notes in front of me. Apologies. Let's try that again. All right. We get D. Bradley Baker as Admiral Casus Constantine, Greg Ellis as Baron Valen Ruder, Kath Souse as Mira Bridger, Matthew Wood is the Stormtrooper squad leader, Jason Isaacs is the Inquisitor, Peter McNichol is Sibo, and Ashley Eckstein is Fulcrum. There we go. All right, got it that time. Got the right notes. Good Lord, Tom. This is why your podcast is not the financial boon like the Kelsey's podcast is. Because you're reading the wrong notes, guy. Anyways, our plot for this week's episode: Kanan and Ezra try to protect an Imperial deserter by distracting the Imperial forces. And of course, we're talking about Sibo, a character who has a connection to Ezra's past, who has answers to the mysterious fate of Ezra's parents, and sort of like Ezra's trauma in this series, as we have kind of begun to get to know it a little bit. But it's a great episode. It's action-packed. There's a lot of fun stuff in this one, and we're going to talk about it on the other side. So you know what that means, friends. It is time. Strap on your buckets. Let's go.
Get out of here. We'll hold them off.
You're going to have to relocate the covert.
This is the way.
This is the way.
Okay, so we're back, and what's really great, about this being a two-part episode is we really get to dive right back into the action, which is the Ghost ripping through space, TIE fighters in hot pursuit, so we're getting space combat right off the jump. We get Star Destroyers coming in from the other side to try and close them off. It's a great sequence. It starts the episode really strongly, and we get a little bit more of what we closed out on, right? Which was Sibo. Revelation. He knows what happened to Ezra's parents, but he's still having a lot of hard time kind of communicating, kind of being all in the moment with us. So it's sort of broken up, it's sort of scattered. Like his train of thought, they crash all the time, and then he's onto something else, and then he's back onto something, and it's kind of frustrating, right? Like he just has all this information from his Lobot headphones coming into his brain, and it's hard for him to process. But we get a Rodian who speaks pretty good Basic, which is pretty cool. We don't see that a ton. We see it more in the animated series. I don't think we've seen it yet in the films. No Rodian speaking English, mostly just the Huttese, which is fine. I don't mind either way. I'm good with it. But after that revelation, Sabine's in the room, Ezra's in the room, and Sabine's like, "Hey, push him for the information. Let's find out what happened to your parents." And Ezra doesn't want to know, and that's really what this episode is about. It's really driven by Ezra and sort of his fear of finding out the true fate of his parents. Like, he's made up his mind in his head that they're dead and gone. He doesn't seem to want the hope that they could still be alive, that there could be something there still for him. He's been alone since he was 7. He tells us this, and being alone has shaped him into who he is now. And for the idea that his parents are still alive, I think it shakes him to his core, in that it would give him hope, which is something that he doesn't seem to have a lot of at this particular point in his life. Believing that his parents might still be alive, believing that there could be something else more for him. He's built all these walls around himself. We've seen that from Ezra in these early episodes, that he's very closed off. But he's starting to make attachments to the crew of the Ghost. He already has a kind of sibling-esque rivalry with Zeb and Chopper. Haven't seen too much of him and Kanan bonding, but we're beginning to. We're beginning to these last few episodes with the Jedi training, sort of that father-son kind of mentorship happening between the two characters. And as we find out, once we go back to Fort Anaxis in the episode, that Ezra's terrified of finding out the truth of what happened to his parents, and that's why he's having such a hard time being able to use the Force in a positive way. Now, Ezra finally admitting that to himself allows him to make the connections that Kanan has been trying to get him to. So he's able to reach out and connect with those creatures at Fort Anaxis, which is a big moment of the show. I'm going to back up a little bit and kind of talk about something else in the show. We'll get back to Ezra and his stuff shortly, but I kind of want to go through the episode a little bit more chronologically, because there's another big piece of lore in this episode that I had forgotten about, but I suspect the internet was well aware of when the movie first came out. But obviously, a big plot element of this episode is the Inquisitor, the Grand Inquisitor himself, launching a Senior Systems tracking homing beacon onto the hull of the Ghost, allowing hyperspace tracking, which is something that was a very big plot point in a certain Star Wars movie that a lot of people don't care for. And I had forgotten this element of things, but obviously it stands out now. Going back, rewatching these things, connecting the dots, and being like, oh, so the Empire's been able to track through hyperspace for a long time, if they wanted to, right? Like if they've had the technology, they've had the systems in place to do so. But it was a major element of this movie, and just kind of goes to show you that maybe some people aren't fact checking as well as they should, or maybe there's a lot of like, hey, don't push back too far against the creatives. We don't want them to have to do their own homework. That'd be crazy. So something that sort of stands out as a bit of an anomaly in the episode. And if there's further explanation of it, I'm unaware of it. So please, if you know something that I don't, reach out, let me know. If there's any gaps in my information, I'd like to fill them in. But yeah, that sort of stood out to me. But anyways, we find out that the homing beacon is in fact on the Phantom. So they're able to break away in a really cool sequence where they separate while in hyperspace, so that the Ghost can go one direction and then get Tebow to safety, while Kanan and Ezra lure the Empire to Fort Anaxis, where they're hoping those creatures will help kind of cause a bit of a diversion for them. And that's where Ezra has his big revelation moment. Now, what's cool is obviously the role of the Inquisitor has been growing as we've gone through these episodes, as we kind of get more and more into the Jedi training between Kanan and Ezra, and we explore a very different dynamic for the Jedi Padawan relationship. This is very unconventional from what we've seen in the prequel series in particular. It's a whole new way of learning, right? And again, we have to remember that Kanan didn't really complete his trials either. He's still a Padawan himself, technically, in terms of the Jedi-ness of him. so it's really great. But what's really cool in the episode, what I really like is Jason Isaacs doing a great job being the Inquisitor and sort of pushing the buttons on Ezra and knowing that Ezra, being older, being someone who wasn't raised in the temple, doesn't have control of his faculties, doesn't have his emotions in check, can be pushed. And the Inquisitor does a great job of pushing those buttons. There's a great sequence where Ezra yells,
Get back!
Ah, yes. Good. Go. Unleash your anger. I will teach you what your master could not.
You don't have anything to teach me.
The darkness is too strong for you, orphan. It is swallowing you up, even now.
No!
Your master will die.
No!
Your friends will die, and everything you hoped for will be lost. This is the way the story ends.
No!
So there it is, the sequence where, again, the Inquisitor just pushes those buttons and gets Ezra to sort of brush up against the dark side of the Force and using his anger, his fear against him. And, Ezra trying to do it out of a place of goodness, right? Trying to protect Kanan, who's, unconscious on the floor. But doesn't quite realize what direction he's going. And again, I like so much of what the Inquisitor says to him, calling him orphan. And, again, just the way he pushes those buttons, knowing that Ezra is extremely susceptible to the dark side. I definitely think the Inquisitor is attempting to gauge whether Ezra is someone who should be brought into the fold, taken in to become an Inquisitor. I think there's a little bit of a gauging on his part to see exactly where this kid is on the Force spectrum, if you will. Is he powerful enough? Is he easily swayed to the darkness? If not, he'll easily, the Inquisitor's plan is to kill him. But I think he might see a little bit of potential the way Kanan does as well, which is something interesting to consider here as well. So Ezra's, again, using the Force, he's not blocked anymore. He came clean with his feelings, with his emotions about the fear of finding out the true fate of his family. So now, touching on the dark side, he goes back to what he just learned, and he's able to summon a really big creature at Fort Anaxis to come after the Inquisitor. And Kanan comes to consciousness and attempts to kind of pull Ezra back from the brink of the dark side. But he's unleashed a really good distraction that helps enable their escape from Fort Anaxis. They get into the Phantom. They disable the Imperial shuttle. And the Inquisitor has a great line about how his master will not be pleased that they escaped from him yet again here at Fort Anaxis. And this gives us a moment to sort of reconnect with the rest of the crew. Hera has persuaded Sibo to reveal the information about Ezra's parents before he heads off with Fulcrum. But what's interesting too is when Ezra has that moment of clarity, when he realizes what he's afraid of, and he realizes that he needs to forgive Sibo, and they have that sort of connection across space and time. And all of a sudden, Ezra's forgiveness seems to sort of trigger something in Sibo where he achieves some clarity that we haven't seen from him yet. His seems more focused. Obviously it's been speculated by both Hera and Sabine that by doing what he did, by volunteering to get these Imperial implants, he's trying to make up for failing the Bridgers, right? For not being able to be there and raise Ezra when they were taken away by the Empire. And Ezra's forgiveness seems to help bring a little clarity to him. And it's a touching, sweet moment. And again, Ezra's journey towards Jedihood is fraught with so much peril because of his emotional damage, his traumas. And in that regard, Ezra has a lot in common with Anakin, and so I think that's why this is such an interesting dynamic, because you can compare and contrast those two characters who came to the Jedi Order later in life than what is traditional for the Jedi Order. But in this regard, because of the circumstances of the galaxy, obviously Ezra's being trained in a very non-traditional way, we'll just say non-traditional. I think we'll go with that word in particular. He's being trained in an unorthodox fashion, if you will, by someone who hadn't even finished their own Jedi trials. So it's a very unique situation, to say the very, very least, about Kanan and Ezra's dynamic as master and apprentice, as Jedi and Padawan. Now, again, technically, I suppose Kanan's still a Padawan, but you would imagine, like, trial by fire, like he's sort of been promoted in the field, if you will. But it's again, it's sort of fun to compare and contrast Ezra to Anakin, because they do have sort of similar emotional issues that will hinder or spur their development, depending on how they take their lessons. And this time around, Ezra has a lot of emotional. I don't know if I want to use the word cleansing or not. But he has these moments where he finally comes to be honest with himself, and that can be that can lift a weight from your shoulders, but at the same time, it can be, I would imagine, quite mentally exhausting to sort of have that mirror held in front of you, and to see the truth that you've been denying from yourself for so long. Like, yes, that weight's lifted, but at the same time, you now have to contemplate your past actions and what drove those, and what mistakes maybe you had made in the past because you were in denial about your feelings, about your emotions. Like, what drove you? And as we talked about when this show first started, Ezra was a very selfish character. Ezra was not out to help other people. He was out to survive and to carve his niche in the world and to protect himself. And he's learning to be selfless. He's learning to be caring of others. He's having to relearn things that he gave up on when he lost his family. And so that's why I find Ezra to be such a compelling character in the long run here. And his development over the next bunch of seasons will change drastically as he gets older and matures more. But this episode is a big turning point for him, where he's able to look himself in the mirror and realize that maybe he wasn't doing the best things possible for others, just for himself. And it's a big deal. It's a turning point moment. This is a great episode of Star Wars Rebels because it's so pivotal for Ezra's emotional development. And I think that's all I have to say about the episode. And again, Kanan also developing, becoming a better teacher, realizing that he's starting to understand better how to show things to Ezra, how to share his knowledge with Ezra. Because, again, I think a lot of us, as we've grown older, we realize that communicating with people is very, very different from person to person. One person understands things one way, and you can talk to a person with a certain directness or whatever. But communication is not just a blanket thing. It's very different for every single person you engage with, particularly when you start dealing with people in different generations. Again, I sort of extrapolate that based on my work experience of talking with older generations and younger generations, and I think that's something that Kanan is coming to realize himself, that because of Ezra's experiences and his traumas and things like that he can't just talk to Ezra like he was talked to as a Padawan, as a little pupil at the Jedi Temple. It's gonna take something different. And I think that's a big moment for Kanan in this episode too, is like, hey, I've been trying to get through to you, but you need to start being honest with yourself. And Kanan starts to figure out how to talk to Ezra more effectively in this episode as well. I'm really looking forward to some more episodes in this season. We still haven't spent a ton of time with the rest of the cast. We haven't spent a ton of time with Hera. We haven't spent a ton of time with Sabine yet. There's still a lot of Zeb story that we don't know about. We've been getting teases about it, about the Lasats and their fate. But this episode in particular, big turning point for this season of the show, and that's why I give this one 8.5 buckets. It's juicy, it's golden, it's a good time, and that's all I've got to say about that, my friends. So let's go ahead and get the heck out of here. I'm gonna wrap this puppy up right now, and remind you guys, hey, hit us up on the socials. We're at @Mando_Vision, Twitter, Instagram. Email the show, mandovisiontom@gmail.com. Be sure you're liking, subscribing, following, and sharing the show with all the Mandalorians in your covert. If possible or so inclined, sweet 5-star reviews. It's like giving the Death Star plans to R2-D2. That's how good it feels when you do it. Truly appreciate you guys. Buckethead Nation, you guys continue to be the best out there in the world. I really am eternally grateful for all the support you have shown me over the years. This podcast continues because of you all. So thank you. Go out there, be great Star Wars fans. Kindness, supportiveness, empathy for others. That's what we talk about in this podcast. That's what we want out of the fandom. Again, we are allowed to disagree with each other, but we do it with respect and kindness in our hearts. So that's what we preach here on the podcast, and I believe everyone who listens to this show has that in their hearts as well. So you guys take care of each other, take care of yourselves. I hope everyone's doing well as we head into the holiday season. Can you guys believe it? I'm going to say it. Can't believe it's November already. Not quite. We still got Halloween coming up, but my goodness, the rest of the year, this is the part of the year where the calendar it's like going downhill. It just goes so fast. So we'll be here with you guys through the holidays, and we'll be back next week to talk about more Star Wars Rebels. All right, Bucketheads, you guys take care. But remember, this podcast can only end one way. This is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way.
Bounty hunting is a complicated profession.